Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me for another video, and in today's video I wanted to talk about how I draw clothing and folds in clothing and my thought process behind it. And I'm just going to say right now that I'm not the best at explaining things, and so this is just going to be a couple of highlights that I believe are important to remember when you're drawing clothing. It's definitely not comprehensive, and if you have any questions or you'd like me to go more in depth, please leave everything down in the comments and I might make a part 2, or answer your questions about those things. But before I get started talking about clothing and how I draw it, I wanted to say that this video is sponsored by Skillshare, so thank you so much to Skillshare for supporting me. So Skillshare is an online learning community with more than 17,000 classes in things such as art, drawing and painting, photography, business, marketing, social media, that kind of thing. So it's very good, especially for small business owners, entrepreneurs, because it will have experts teach classes that are more in-depth than just YouTube classes. You pay a monthly membership for the whole website and you can try out as many classes as you would like to, so it is very beneficial in that sense. You don't have to pay for each individual class. You can even make your own classes if you feel like you have some insight to share, and so it's pretty cool that way. Membership starts at $10 a month, and if you'd like to try out the website, I will have a link in my description for the first 200 people who sign up to get a free 2-month trial to the website. I definitely recommend that you try it out at least, because you don't really have anything to lose, and I really appreciate what Skillshare does. It is very helpful in my opinion. So yeah, on to talking about how I draw clothing. First thing that I like to remember is that clothing and cloth bunches up at seams and joints. Obviously you wear clothes all the time, so you should sort of have an understanding of the seams of where your clothes are, like from your shoulders and your arms, on your sides. Those are like the main cuts of like a t-shirt. So remembering where those seams are is very useful. Depending on the kind of material, there will be wrinkles and folds around those. If you have a thicker and more like stiff material, the folds might be bigger and not as wrinkly, like they might be straighter and larger. But if you have like a thinner material, like a t-shirt material, there will be more definite wrinkles around those areas. And obviously cloth will wrinkle at joints. So just keeping in mind the joints of your body, obviously, those will help you figure out where to put wrinkles in clothing. Also, cloth is pulled down by gravity, obviously, unless there's like a dynamic pose or something that is not exactly common. It is normal, obviously, for clothes to be pulled down. So, for me, the biggest place that I see this is the seam of the cloth of the shoulders, as it goes down on your arms. For example, for a t-shirt, I've noticed that if you look at a lot of t-shirts, there will be a lot of folds that kind of like pull the fabric down toward the ground. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you look at a couple of my drawings, you'll see what I mean. There is going to be a seam there, and it's somehow like the fabric is being pulled down. So I think it's very important to be using reference whenever you're drawing clothing and you're unfamiliar with how it folds, but remembering that it is pulled down by gravity and that it does fold at seams and wherever it is bunched up. If it's like a different kind of cut, whenever I draw like puppy skirts, the amount of material in the dress all has to sort of be cinched in towards the waist, and so all of that material, I remember that it has to go somewhere, so it will always bunch, and so that's why I create folds right at the top of the sort of at the waist. There's different cuts of dresses, of course. It could be an A-line dress, and so there wouldn't be that many folds over there, but it's always cool to keep in mind exactly how the clothing is cut. So you will have to look at a couple of references to discover what some clothing items that you're unfamiliar with, how they would fall. So another thing that I have to mention is that clothing is sort of organic the way it moves and it falls. I wouldn't really stress about getting the perfect fold in the perfect spot. I don't think that's the way it works. I think you should just remember the general volume and the sort of material that something is made out of and where it's falling, which way it's being led, and sort of just organically place lines that kind of suggest that folding and that wrinkling in the cloth. It's really hard to explain, but yeah, don't focus too much on getting the perfect lines for that wrinkling. I always make sure that any wrinkles that I place on the clothing, you can sort of see where they're being drawn from. So a lot of times I'll have wrinkles around the chest, and that's because the material is being pulled from sort of the armpits, you know, from the seams around the arms. And so I kind of make sure that I remember that the cloth is being pulled from those seams. And I will say that harder lines will indicate a stiffer material and or like a tighter cut. If you can notice on the first girl's like bodice, there are a couple of harder, more jagged lines, and that's because I wanted to show that the bodice has a little bit more of a volume and thickness to it, as well as being tight. So it kind of has a more of a rigid look. You know, obviously if you're going to use stiffer lines, it is going to indicate a stiffer material that you're using. So on the flip side of that, a softer, fluffier lines will indicate more of a flowy, lighter material. And so those are obviously going to be affected by gravity. If you look at my drawings, you will notice that I use a lot of fluffy materials in my drawings, and so I always try to remember where the seams are. That's really important to me, to remember the cut of the material before I actually start drawing the clothing. If cloth is going to be tight, like around the chest in a couple of these drawings, I will show that certain lines, the material will kind of become tighter. And if you have any difficulties in understanding how cloth works, just look at your own clothing, use reference, and just notice kind of the general way that it does flow. The more lines that you have close together will indicate a thin material and a wrinklier look, and the fewer lines that you have together and like the sharper and harder lines will indicate that the material is stiffer and that it doesn't fold and buckle as much. It is very important to use quick lines that you don't place too much thought into them. Of course, you should know the general area that you're going towards, but if you place too much thought in them, they will start to look very mechanical and not organic. So for cloth that you would like to look pretty organic, I would recommend that you sort of have a rough sketch and an idea of where you're going with it, but to be pretty loose with your lines and to let the shape take hold of itself. Also remember that the cloth is sort of like cylindrical when it is on your body, so try to think of the 3D aspect whenever you're drawing it. So whenever you're drawing like a t-shirt, for example, the sleeve of it will not be a completely straight line unless maybe you were drawing a very thick material and a very loose cut of clothing, and that way, you know, I could see it being a straight line. Remember the cylindrical form of the body and see how the cloth sort of meshes and melds to that form. Remember that arms and legs are circular and that cloth sort of follows that shape. It is very important to know how anatomy works whenever you're drawing clothing so that you can have that cloth sort of move around the body and, you know, sort of be cylindrical. But yeah, I hope that was sort of helpful. I'm very bad at explaining things, and I hope this was a little bit helpful. Please comment down with any specific questions that you have, and I could make a part 2 to this video and explain it a little bit more in depth. I know I'm not the best at explaining things, but yeah, I hope this is helpful to you, and maybe that it has helped you with, you know, drawing more organic lines and shapes. Definitely don't stress about it too much. Don't worry about making the perfect lines in the perfect places. I never really calculate my lines unless I'm going to be drawing something very stiff that just requires like one specific line to show the texture of the material, you know, as I said, like the bodice or maybe even the straps for the girl in the middle. Yeah, I hope this was helpful to you. If you like this video, please leave me a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more videos, because I put them out every single Sunday. I've been trying to, and yeah, I'm home for break, so I will be putting out a lot of videos. Okay, cool. I will talk to you guys next week. Bye!